Thanks, Rachel. If you are looking for the session on practicing high quality PDSAs, you can private message Kate and she'll get you to the right spot. Oh. Rachel, did we just lose the slides? Okay. All right, can everyone see the slides? Okay, great. All right, so we know you guys have been testing change ideas over the last few months, and we're going to really talk in this session about how you can expand your PDSA testing, really thoroughly testing an idea until you are confident that everyone should be doing this new change and it should become the new practice. Next slide, Rachel. We're seeing the like the presenter mode. I don't know if other folks are seeing that too, but it's a little hard to see the slides.
Okay, let me see.
Okay.
Sorry, y'all.
All right, as I already said, this is a session on PDSA ramp. So if you are looking for that, you're in the right spot. And if not, you can, there you go, that's good. Just private message Kate. All right, so the model for improvement is the method that we are using to carry out our improvement work. And the Plan, Do, Study, Act, or the PDSA cycle, is the action part of that model. It's how you are testing your change ideas to make sure that they work in your settings. And while the model only shows one PDSA cycle, in reality, it's almost always necessary to run several PDSA cycles on each change idea to really learn about how it's going to work best in your setting. And that series of PDSA cycles on an idea is called a PDSA ramp. It's this idea of consecutive or iterative testing, fine-tuning a change based on what you're learning. So, you know, hopefully each of your PDSA cycles is resulting in a lot of learning. And we want to reflect on that learning from completing one cycle and use that learning to directly inform the plan for the next PDSA cycle. So we're going to watch a short clip from October Sky. And for those of you who haven't seen it, we'll watch some scenes as 4 teenage boys try to build a rocket. And as you watch, I want you to look for and count how many PDSA cycles they run and think about how their PDSA cycles build on each other. So Anna, if you could go ahead and play the video. So how many PDSA cycles did you guys see? Go ahead and chat in. 16, 13, 15, a lot. Great. Yeah, so I counted at least 15. You know, they didn't build a rocket that launched on the first try, but they learned from each launch, each test, to continue to build a better rocket. And notice how they really spent time as a team to think about what happened in each test, right? They talked about each launch and planned for what changes were needed to make the next test, the next launch, even better. Each test was informed by what they learned from all the previous tests. And that's exactly what a PDSA ramp allows us to do. Next slide, Rachel. Allows for testing and adapting ideas on a small scale at first to learn what works, and then ultimately testing the idea on an increasing scale over longer periods of time or under different conditions. And you move up that ramp as you increase your confidence that the change is resulting in improvement is effective, and as the will for the idea builds. So we start at the bottom of that ramp with our ideas, our hunches about what is going to result in improvement. And we test those changes on a very small scale. This is where we are now. Tests are rapid and small. And these early PDSA cycles allow us to learn and refine the idea before we increase the scope in any way. So you might run several PDSA cycles with one home visitor or one family, because you're still learning how to change a process so that it works most comfortably, most efficiently, most effectively. So you can stay small until you're really confident in that idea. Next slide. Again, this is where we are now. Those initial PDSA cycles are on the smallest scale possible. Those cycles fast and less burdensome. So those ends of one are great. One home visit, one staff member, one family. And our goal is to really learn as much as possible about an idea in the quickest time. So as I share the different PDSA cycles that you might run in a ramp, I'm going to walk through an example of what a series of PDSA cycles would look like related to reflective supervision. Thanks, Rachel. So a team is looking to improve their reflective supervision practice, and they have created and are testing a checklist and a prompt sheet that has 7 elements of reflective supervision that the supervisor can use during supervision as a reminder and a guide. So they're just starting out, and their first cycle, they're going to have one supervisor test the checklist and the prompts to prepare for and engage in reflective supervision with one home visitor, and they're going to do this on June 1st. And after testing, the supervisor was able to use 4 of 7 elements of reflective supervision and reported feeling somewhat confident with providing reflective supervision. So the supervisor is going to make some modifications to the checklist based on their own reflections and feedback from the home visitor. So what do you think it would make sense for this team to do for their second PDSA cycle? How might they continue to test the idea? Just go ahead and chat in. You can go to the next slide. So what would they do next? They tested this with one supervisor and one home visitor. So Wendy's sharing, listing what the modifications will be, adding another supervisor or a home visitor, a second home visitor, test with 2, make the adaptations, test again with modifications. Great. So we certainly want to be incorporating that learning on the prompt sheet and the checklist in that second cycle, right? So you're going to make those modifications that the supervisor and the home visitor talked about. And then remember, it makes sense often to run a few cycles of that n equals 1. You're still learning how to do something new. So here in this first test, that supervisor used 4 of the 7 elements, and they reported feeling somewhat confident. If you really want to get to that 7 of 7 elements and the supervisor feeling very confident, you can still stay small with that second test until you're more confident in using the checklist. So here we can see that in that second cycle, you're going to have one home visitor, again, test it with one supervisor, test it with one home visitor. Continuing to stay small, and just 2 days after that first test. In that test, the supervisor reported feeling more confident, so very confident, and they were able to incorporate 6 of 7 elements of reflective supervision. Then in cycle 3, stay pretty small, but expanding a little bit. So one home visitor is going to test, one supervisor is going to test with another home visitor, and then a second supervisor is also going to test with another home visitor. So a lot of the ideas that you guys had in the chat, so that's great. So those are our initial tests. And even though we're starting small, at the end of the day, we want a change that's going to result in improvement for everyone. So after those first few cycles have increased your confidence in an idea, you want to start challenging that confidence with wider scale tests to see, will this idea work at a bigger scale, over different longer times, and under different conditions. And you want to test these changes and these ideas under many different conditions as possible to learn what support is needed to make sure this change works for everyone. And just like with those initial cycles, you're going to make adaptations with each cycle as you learn. And testing a change under many different conditions can also help manage any anticipated resistance. So, you might have some staff who are going to say, well, this idea isn't going to work for me because of X, Y, or Z. But if you've anticipated that resistance and you've tested the idea under X, Y, and Z conditions or with X, Y, and Z, you have some evidence to back up your implementation. Next slide. So it can be hard to think about how to continue to test an idea. Teams run those initial 3 to 4 cycles and then adopt an idea. So we would love to just brainstorm what are some different conditions specific to home visiting that it would be important for you guys to be thinking about and testing your ideas on. So chat in, again, think about what are those different conditions that you guys are thinking about testing your ideas under or have tested your ideas under to make sure this change idea is really effective. Go ahead and chat in again. Seeing lots of good ideas here. Previous experience and results, different populations served, different languages, different cultures, rural versus urban, different cultures and languages, different workers, ages, great. Experience of home visitors. Emily, yes, the slides. I think the slides are available on the website now, so you should be able to go and download them. Working versus stay-at-home parents, great. All right, Rachel, if you want to take us to the next slide. Different size families, great. So you guys, I think, said most of these, but, in terms of the different conditions, you can think about home visitor experience level. Do new home visitors need any different support than experienced home visitors? Client load. Does an idea work if you have 5 clients as well as it does if you have 25 clients? What about type of visit? What adaptations need to be made in a virtual setting versus in person? I know you guys have been thinking a lot about the virtual settings. Relationship with client, does something about the idea need to change if you're starting out new with a client versus having an established relationship? A lot of you said languages spoken or cultural traditions might need to be considered as you test ideas too. So these are just some of the examples of different conditions. You can also think about the size of the test, right? So you can think about expanding the number of staff or the number of clients that you're using an idea with. Maybe you start with 1 and then 3 and then 5 and then 10. Next slide, Rachel. So thinking about our example, after the initial 3 tests, the team starts expanding the number of home visitors. So in their 4th cycle, they have all 4 supervisors test the reflective supervision guide. And in this test, one supervisor reports not feeling very confident in one of their sessions. The home visitor was talking about a case of IPV, and the supervisor just really didn't feel prepared. And this was something that hadn't come up in the previous tests. So the team decides that the guide and the checklist really needs to be adapted to include some topic-specific prompts for some of those more sensitive topics. So to do that, the team runs several additional PDSA cycles, with each supervisor testing the guide in one home visiting topic area each. So that's cycles 5 through 8. And they also have a new home visitor starting, so they want to make sure to test the idea with the new home visitor too. Rachel, I will turn it to you.
Thanks so much, Trisha. So you'll see they ran so many cycles to get up the ramp. And then what happens after they've decided that this is the change that they want to keep? We'll talk about implementation of change now. So you're really wanting to hardwire the change and build support in the systems to make sure that this is the way we're doing our work. This is just how we're operating now. And so your PDSA testing doesn't just end with wide-scale tests of change. We continue to test in PDSAs around implementation of the change. So this team, they use the reflective supervision guide as a standard practice with all of their supervisors. The supervisors were trained in using the guide, and data on home visitors reported, supported, documented in the data system and reviewed monthly during team meetings. So they knew they were using this guide as their practice. So how do you know when you should expand your tests? We talked a lot about testing very small early on, and we're building it up our belief. But you'll see in this chart here on the top, the staff readiness to make a change is labeled here as resistant, indifferent in the middle, and ready. So when your staff is resistant and your degree of belief is low and the cost is high, you're going to start with very small scale PDSAs to gain belief that this is the change that's going to make the difference. And you can start building it up all the way. So we're going from the top left corner, so that the staff is resistant, the degree of belief that the change is going to make a difference is low, and it has a high cost. We're going to start very small here. We're going to test very carefully because you don't want to waste time, resources for something that you're not quite sure if it's going to work or not. And then we build across all of these to get to the bottom left or bottom right corner is where we're testing for implementation. So our staff are ready. They believe this change is going to make a difference for their families, for their workload. Their degree of belief is high, and there's a low cost that this is not going to work. And so that's when we're really getting to that green box where we're implementing the test. We know that this is working, and we're running PDSA cycles around implementation. So this is kind of how we build through from starting our tests at the N of 1 to spreading for wide-scale tests all the way to implementation. And so we wanted to really introduce this PDSA ramp planning form to y'all. And this is how you kind of think through cycles ahead. So you're testing PDSAs, but how do they build on each other? How do we continue to go from one cycle to the next? And this is the way that you're going to be able to set your plan for future cycles. And you can adjust each cycle as needed. So you might learn something really interesting in cycle 2 that you weren't planning on. So you might want to redo cycle 3 with the information that you learned. But it's just a way to kind of get an idea about how you can continue to build, how you can plan to build on your tests that you have. And we're going to get to practice with one team. So Family Focus is a group out of Illinois, and I think Maria is on the call. I'm hoping Maria is on the call. Maria, if you could come off mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Yay. Great. And we just wanted, they've started this ramp cycle, and we wanted to get some more information about how cycle 1 and 2 went, and then we'll start building cycles 3 and 4 out. So if you'll start talking to us a little bit about how you're testing this script to introduce your screenings and how that's gone so far.
So for cycle 1, we did a script to test it with one of our home visitors. So she did it, and we did with virtual home visits. So this was through the phone or FaceTime. So the home visitor was able to complete the plan using the script with 2 participants, and one of the participants when introduced the EPDS, and home visitor was not able to get the expected results because the family was there when she was doing it. So we adapted and we made some changes, and then another home visitor tested in cycle 2, and she felt comfortable doing it. So she felt a 9 as the comfort level. So we wanted to test them more.
Great. So they started small with introducing it with one home visitor with 2 families. They learned something here, so they adapted their cycle to add more to the script. And then they tested it with a different home visitor and a different family. And so that's really interesting that you already implemented those or included those changes in your next PDSA cycle. And so as we're looking at how we move from cycle 1 to cycle 4, how might you continue to test this script with your home visitors and families?
We want to do the script like in a person visit now, since we're doing in-person visits now. So we're gonna test it in a in-person visit.
So we're gonna do a script to introduce the screening at an in-person. Wonderful. And how many home visitors are going to test this, or do you have an idea of who might test this first?
One home visitor with probably 1 or 2 families.
Okay. And when are you thinking your next home visit?
Probably about 2 or 3 weeks. We wanna.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll say 6:15 to 6:30.
Yeah.
And what's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen?
Probably using the script, the home visitor will feel more comfortable in person, doing the EPDS in person.
The result and them feeling more comfortable. So I think you did it on a scale of 10.
Yeah.
So, do you have a guess of what their comfort level might be on that scale?
I'm hoping that it's an 8 or 9.
Okay. Perfect. So that's great. So you're still testing small with 1 home visitor and 1 or 2 families, but we're testing in a different circumstance now. So we're going over to in-person home visits. Do you have any thoughts about what you might learn from an in-person visit, or what the family might think? Just out of curiosity.
Not sure, because some of these families are new and never met the home visitors. So this can be very either, yay, we got a good result, or the home visitor and the family felt uncomfortable when asking these questions. So
yeah, I think either way you go there, you're gonna learn a lot from your families that you're testing with, and be able to adapt the script or continue to testing across families. So that would be your 3rd cycle. Do you have any other ideas about how you might want to continue to test?
For the 4th cycle, since we have a doula program, we want to incorporate the doula as well using the script to see what's the difference between the FSS and the doula.
Wonderful. Are they still doing virtual visits, or are you going to test this with the doula in person?
In person as well.
Okay.
Yeah, in person.
All right. So 1 doula with 1 or 2 families again?
Yes.
Okay. And this will probably start July 1st. And like I said, you can always adapt this and change the start dates. This is just giving us a time frame of what we could expect. But what would your prediction here be? So if we're testing this with a doula, anything different, or?
I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that the doula feels the same way comfortable when introducing the EPDS. And I think she's more used to doing, the doula is more used of doing EPDS, and she gets a lot of families in a short term rather than the home visitor that has them a long term for a long term. So
Okay. So still an 8 or 9 on the scale, or do you think she's gonna feel even more comfortable?
I want to say 8 because the doula is new
Okay.
role. So
Perfect. Thank you, Maria. Any questions from the audience? And if you want to chat them in, feel free. We have Maria here to talk through her cycle. Or Trisha, anything to add?
I was just going to chat. Great job thinking about different conditions. And the only other thing I chatted in was when you guys are planning your PDSA cycles and thinking about the timing, sometimes it's helpful to, pull up your participant list or your visit for the upcoming weeks and see, who's due for screens. You can really put that specific date in. You might be able to target specific home visitors that have screenings coming up, and that allows you to sort of move quickly to tests if you're actually, looking at those home visits and seeing who is due. So that just might be something that you guys can do, during your team meetings to really get specific in the whens of the tests.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. So now, thank you to you and your team for testing and for joining us today and thinking about all of those the ways you want to test your script. So now we're going to go into some individual and team time. So we're hoping that you can select one change that your team has tested in the last month and has decided to continue to test. And we're going to think through you're going to use that PDSA ramp form to design your next 2 to 3 PDSA cycles, just like we did with Maria on how you're going to build that cycle and test in different conditions. So as you're doing this, remember that you want to collect useful data so you know what to do next. For Maria's example, we did that comfort scale. We want to really increase the home visitor comfort, and that's what we were collecting during it. Remember to start small with rapid tests, willing volunteers, so those high will people, and you're going to build confidence in the idea by doing that. And so after that initial cycle has built confidence, and then you might want to increase the scope of testing. So over a variety of conditions with more people, more home visitors, more families. And then after you complete your ramp, consider the following reflection questions. How did you think about expanding your testing? How did completing the ramp form help your team think about building knowledge sequentially? And will thinking a couple cycles ahead help your team move more rapidly from test to test? So we're going to take some time here to give you time to think about this within your own setting. And then we're going to come back together and share some reflections and some ramps that you've been working on with the group to get some more feedback on how this is happening. Okay, so I think we're taking 10 minutes, Trisha, or you want to do 8 minutes?
Yeah, maybe 8. So yeah, I think that's good. And
okay.
Just so folks know, I did put the link in the chat box, but the PowerPoint slide that Rachel was completing, that is on the website with all of the day 2 materials. So you can click on that link and go, and you can work right from that form.
So go ahead and take the next 8 minutes, and we will come back together at 1:54 Eastern, and we'll share what your thoughts are and how your PDSA ramps are going. I should have had music ready, Trisha. I'm so bummed. Next time.
I was just thinking that too. Although that might be distracting.
And if you need us, please put your questions in the chat and we can help you brainstorm. Bye. right. We've reached the end of our 8 minutes, which I'm sure flew by for you, but for Trisha and myself, I think it went really long time. It felt really long. And so we want to bring everyone back together and start our peer share. It's going to be a pretty quick peer share, but how did this go? How did you think about expanding your testing, and how did completing the ramp form help you think about building knowledge sequentially? And is this going to help you as you move more rapidly from test to test? So anyone brave enough to come off of mute, or feel free to enter into the chat box, that works too. Just wondering how this went.
So I'll speak only because we are unconventional and kind of blew everything up. So we had our I've mentioned before, our amount of testing is not the issue for us. It's culturally and feeling like the testing or the EPDS is just more of a checklist. And so we've tried to really focus our efforts on better understanding what each question on the EPDS means, better understanding, removing stigmas and that kind of stuff. And that's been our whole storyboard from the beginning. So when we did the mothers and babies training, was it last week, 2 weeks? This whole month is a blur. We actually decided to just trash pretty much our entire PDSA plan and refocus based on the new knowledge that we got during mothers and babies training to integrate mothers and babies into all of our groups as an ongoing stress management, self-care, take away the stigma about talking about when you're overwhelmed process, and then flip it and then go backwards. So rather than starting with a depression screening, start working with our big group as, you know, these are things that we all deal with, and some of us deal with it better than others, and there's no stigma, and we're here to reach out and help. And then give us the opportunity to narrow it down individually and bring that back into the visits to rescreen with a better understanding and less stigma. So we kind of started in one way and then kind of just flipped the whole game after getting more training.
Awesome. Well, that's great to see that you took what you learned and are testing in a different area, and that's okay. You learned stuff the whole collaborative, and that's really interesting. So you're using it during your group supervisions? Is that how you're doing it, or in group connections?
We're going to start introducing it because we're actually having our first in-person group next week. We're so excited.
Congrats.
Thank you. We're so excited. But one of the things we learned from COVID is we get far more participation of our families on virtual groups because it's easier. And so we're going to continue to do that. And so our virtual groups will then give us the opportunity to do a deep dive into more serious topics, whereas the in-person groups will be more of that parent-child activities and socialization and fun. Mm-hmm. And it'll get us to a point where we can expand the program, which has been a CQI goal for years. We just didn't have the staff to do the parent education piece. Mm-hmm. So virtually was our answer to that.
Very nice. Well, good luck next week. I hope that goes well. I think it will.